A 70-year-old billionaire collapses in a private dining room, clutching his throat. Around him, his family and business partners simply watch, sipping their wine, waiting for him to die. It wasn't a medical anomaly. It was an execution by inaction. But they didn't count on the waitress who refused to look away. To the ultra-wealthy patrons of Waitress, one of Chicago's most exclusive Michelin-starred restaurants, Gemma Hayes was essentially a ghost. At 28, she wore the crisp black-and-white uniform of high-end hospitality, like a cloak of invisibility. The clientele didn't look at her face. They looked at the vintage of the Bordeaux she poured and the precision with which she set down their truffle-shaved Wagyu. That was exactly how the restaurant management wanted it, and usually it was how Gemma preferred it too. Gemma hadn't dreamed of carrying silver trays for a living. 3 years prior, she had been at the top of her class in nursing school at Loyola University, fiercely dedicated to emergency medicine. But life has a way of derailing the best-laid plans. When her mother was diagnosed with early-onset dementia, the crushing weight of medical bills and full-time caregiving forced Gemma to drop out. Serving $500 dinners to hedge fund managers was the only way she could keep her mother in a safe facility. She traded trauma bays for dining rooms, but her clinical instincts never really left her. She still scanned the room not just for empty water glasses, but for flushed faces, shaky hands, and signs of intoxication. It was a frigid Tuesday evening in November when the reservation came in for the Monarch Room, Waitress's soundproofed private dining vault located at the back of the establishment. The name on the reservation was Maxwell Pierce. Maxwell Pierce was a titan in the commercial real estate sector, a man whose net worth hovered comfortably in the low billions. He was notorious in the financial pages for his aggressive acquisitions and his complete lack of sentimentality. At 68, he was a physically imposing man, though recent rumors whispered that his health was failing. Gemma was assigned to the Monarch Room. As she silently entered to pour the initial round of sparkling water, she immediately sensed the suffocating tension. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken resentments and high-stakes maneuvering. Seated around the mahogany table were 4 people. At the head was Maxwell, his face stony and pale. To his right sat his third wife, Lydia, a woman in her early 40s draped in understated but obscenely expensive cashmere, her eyes darting nervously around the room. To his left was Harrison, Maxwell's estranged stepson from a previous marriage, who had recently been brought back into the company under mysterious circumstances. Next to Harrison sat Gregory Cole, Maxwell's longtime corporate attorney, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. "The papers are drawn up, Maxwell," Gregory was saying, his voice smooth as silk, as Gemma meticulously folded a stray napkin. "But restructuring the trust this aggressively, it leaves a lot of vulnerabilities. If something were to happen to you before the quarter ends..." "Nothing is going to happen to me, Gregory," Maxwell snapped, his voice raspy but dripping with authority. He took a sip of water, his hand trembling just slightly. "The new will takes effect at midnight tonight. Lydia gets her fixed stipend. Harrison gets the failing retail division to play with, and the voting shares go to the charitable foundation. I'm done watching vultures circle my legacy." Gemma stepped back into the shadows near the serving station, her face impassive. She was used to hearing the secrets of the 1%. They spoke in front of her because, to them, she was part of the furniture. Lydia's jaw tightened. "After 10 years, Maxwell? A fixed stipend? You're treating me like a dismissed employee." "You've spent like a rogue nation for a decade, Lydia," Maxwell retorted, leaning forward. Consider it severance, Harrison chuckled, a dark, bitter sound. He's going to burn it all down before he lets any of us have a dime. Typical. Gemma retreated to the kitchen to retrieve their appetizers, her heart pounding slightly. The animosity in the room wasn't just typical family drama. It was venomous. When she returned with the plates of seared scallops, Maxwell was visibly sweating. He was dabbing his forehead with a linen napkin, his breathing shallow. Gemma's nursing instincts immediately flared. She noted the slight greyish tint to his skin, the way he was favoring his left arm, keeping it pinned tightly to his side. Angina, she thought. Or worse. She set his plate down. Is everything to your liking, Mr. Pierce? Can I get you anything else? She asked, intentionally breaking the cardinal rule of speaking only when spoken to by the host. Maxwell looked up at her, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. Before he could speak, Lydia intervened. We are perfectly fine. Please leave us. We are discussing private family matters. Gemma nodded and stepped back out into the dimly lit hallway, leaving the heavy oak door open just a crack so she could monitor the table. She stood by the side station, an uneasy knot twisting in her stomach. 10 minutes later, the main courses were ready. Gemma grabbed the tray and walked back toward the monarch room. As she approached the cracked door, she heard a sharp gasp, followed by the sound of shattering crystal. She peered through the gap. Maxwell was half standing, clutching the center of his chest. His face had gone from pale to a terrifying shade of crimson, the veins in his neck bulging as he gasped for air. He was choking, but it wasn't food. He was having a massive myocardial infarction, a severe heart attack. My pills! Maxwell choked out, his hand frantically patting the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket. He pulled out a small glass vial of nitroglycerin pills, but his fingers were numb. The vial slipped, bouncing off the mahogany table and shattering on the thick Persian rug. Tiny white pills scattered across the floor. Gemma's hand went to the doorknob, ready to rush in. But what she saw next froze her in place. Maxwell collapsed forward, his head hitting the table with a sickening thud, before his dead weight pulled him out of the chair. He crashed onto the floor, his hands still clawing at his chest. Gemma expected the room to erupt. She expected Lydia to scream, Harrison to dive for the pills, or Gregory to pull out his phone and dial 911. Instead, there was absolute, horrifying silence. Lydia stood up slowly, her hands resting calmly on the table. She looked down at her husband, who was now writhing on the rug, a faint gurgling sound escaping his lips. Harrison leaned back in his chair. He glanced at the scattered nitroglycerin pills near his expensive Italian leather shoes. With a subtle, deliberate movement, he slid his foot outward, sweeping the closest pills under the dark shadow of the dining table, out of reach. Gregory Cole simply picked up his wine glass, taking a slow, measured sip as he looked at the gold Rolex on his wrist. It was 11:15 p.m. In 45 minutes, the new will, the one cutting them all out, would take effect. If Maxwell died before midnight, the old trust remained. They were letting him die. A surge of pure adrenaline and righteous fury exploded in Gemma's chest. The golden rule of high-end hospitality was discretion. You do not intervene. You do not cause a scene. You defer to the guests. But Gemma wasn't just a waitress. She was a healer who had sworn an oath to preserve life, even if she had never gotten the fancy piece of paper to prove it. Gemma kicked the heavy oak door open. It banged loudly against the wall, shattering the serene, deadly quiet of the room. All three guests snapped their heads toward her. "What are you doing in here?" Lydia hissed, dropping her calm facade. Get out! Gemma ignored her. She threw her serving tray onto the nearest credenza and dropped to her knees beside Maxwell. His lips were turning a terrifying shade of cyanotic blue. He was no longer breathing, and his eyes had rolled back. She pressed 2 fingers to his carotid artery. Nothing. No pulse. He was in full cardiac arrest. "He doesn't have a pulse!" Gemma shouted, looking directly at Gregory. "Call 911, now!" Gregory set his wineglass down, his expression hardening. "Our private concierge doctor is already on his way, miss. You need to step back and give him space. He is a very private man, and wouldn't want a scene." "He's dead!" Gemma screamed. "Call an ambulance!" When no one moved, Gemma reached into her apron, pulled out her own cheap smartphone, and dialed 911, putting it on speaker and tossing it onto the floor beside her. Immediately, she interlocked her fingers, locked her elbows, and positioned the heel of her hand on the center of Maxwell's sternum. 1, 2, 3, 4. She pushed hard and fast, the rhythm of CPR taking over her muscle memory. On the 3rd compression, she felt the sickening familiar pop of a rib cracking under the pressure. It was a good sign. It meant she was compressing deeply enough. "Stop it!" Lydia shrieked, suddenly stepping forward. "You're breaking his ribs! You're hurting him, you stupid girl!" Lydia reached down and grabbed Gemma's shoulder, her manicured nails digging into the waitress's uniform, trying to haul her away from the billionaire's body. "Get your hands off me!" Gemma roared, shoving Lydia back with her elbow without breaking her rhythm. 15, 16, 17. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled from the phone on the floor. "I have a 68-year-old male in cardiac arrest at L'Orchidee restaurant on North Michigan Avenue. The Monarch room in the back," Gemma yelled between compressions. "I am performing CPR. I need an ambulance and ALS immediately." Harrison stood up, his face flushed with rage. He loomed over Gemma. "You are assaulting my father. I am telling you to stop right now, or I will have you arrested for battery." "He has no pulse. If I stop, he stays dead," Gemma shot back, sweat beading on her forehead. 28, 29, 30. She pinched Maxwell's nose, tilted his chin back, and delivered 2 rescue breaths. The door burst open again. It was Matteo, a 19-year-old busboy, his eyes wide with panic. "Matteo!" Gemma screamed. "The AED! It's in the manager's office behind the host stand. Run! Bring it to me right now!" Matteo hesitated, looking at the furious billionaires, then at Gemma. "Go!" she barked with the authority of a trauma surgeon. Matteo turned and sprinted down the hall. Gregory Cole moved closer, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. He crouched down beside Gemma. "Listen to me very carefully," he whispered, so the 911 operator couldn't hear. "You are a waitress. You make what? Minimum wage plus tips? If you stop right now and walk out that shut door, I will personally see to it that a check for $100,000 is deposited into your bank account tomorrow morning. No one will ever know." Gemma locked eyes with the lawyer. The offer was staggering. It was her mother's medical debt wiped clean. It was her nursing school tuition paid in full. It was freedom. All she had to do was stop moving her hands and let nature and the greed of the people in this room take its course. She looked down at Maxwell. He was an aggressive, ruthless billionaire who would probably never thank her. But he was a human being. "Go to hell!" Gemma spat. She pressed her hands back onto his chest and resumed compressions. 1, 2, 3. "You little bitch," Harrison snarled. He reached down, grabbing Gemma by the collar of her shirt, violently yanking her backward. Gemma lost her balance and crashed into the leg of the table, her shoulder flaring with pain. Harrison stood between her and Maxwell's body. "The show is over. You're fired. Get out." Before Gemma could scramble back up, Matteo came skidding into the room, clutching the bright yellow automated external defibrillator. "Throw it to me," Gemma yelled. Matteo tossed the machine. Gemma caught it, ripped the zipper open, and tore the pads from their packaging. Harrison lunged at her again, but this time, Matteo, bless the brave kid, stepped in the way, shoving the billionaire's son back. "Leave her alone, man!" Matteo yelled. Gemma tore open Maxwell's expensive dress shirt, sending mother-of-pearl buttons flying across the room. She slapped the sticky electrode pads onto his bare chest, one on the upper right, one on the lower left. She hit the green power button. The mechanical voice of the AED filled the room. "Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient." Gemma threw her hands up, stepping back. "Nobody touch him!" The machine paused. The silence in the room was deafening, save for the wailing of sirens in the distance, growing rapidly closer. Lydia was weeping now, fake, performative tears. Gregory was staring at Gemma with a look of pure, unadulterated venom. "Shock advised," the machine announced. "Charging." A high-pitched whine emanated from the device. "Stand clear. Press the flashing orange button now." Gemma leaned forward and pressed the button. Maxwell's body jolted violently off the floor, a massive spasm of electricity surging through his failing heart. He dropped back down, limp. Gemma instantly went back into compressions. She was exhausted, her arms burning, her knees bruised from the hard floor. But she didn't slow down. Suddenly, Maxwell inhaled. It wasn't a breath. It was a ragged, violent gasp. His eyes fluttered open, unseeing and terrified. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound, and rolled onto his side. "He's back," Gemma breathed, tears of relief pricking her eyes. "He has a pulse." Seconds later, 4 Chicago Fire Department paramedics swarmed into the Monarch room, carrying jump bags and a stretcher. They immediately took over, pushing Gemma gently to the side. As they loaded the bewildered, barely conscious billionaire onto the stretcher, Harrison leaned close to Gemma's ear. The paramedics couldn't hear him over the chaos. "You think you're a hero," Harrison whispered, his breath hot against her neck. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. We are going to destroy you." Gemma stood trembling against the wall as they wheeled Maxwell out. She had saved his life. But as she looked at the cold, murderous glares of Lydia, Harrison, and Gregory, she realized the nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. The blue and red lights of the Chicago Fire Department ambulance faded into the freezing November night, leaving a haunting silence in their wake along North Michigan Avenue. Inside Lockheed, the atmosphere had shifted from shocked paralysis to a toxic, frantic scramble. Gemma stood near the maitre d' station, her uniform stained with sweat and the faint, coppery scent of blood from where her knees had scraped the hardwood floor. Her hands were still shaking violently, the adrenaline slowly draining from her system and leaving behind a hollow, terrifying exhaustion. She didn't even have time to catch her breath before Claude, the restaurant's impeccably tailored general manager, gripped her arm with bruising force. He dragged her away from the remaining patrons and shoved her into his cramped, windowless office near the wine cellar, slamming the heavy door behind them. "What have you done?" Claude hissed, his face a mask of absolute fury. His French accent, usually a cultivated purr for the wealthy guests, was now sharp and vicious. You assaulted a billionaire in my dining room. You shattered a rib, you caused a scene, and you violated the strictest non-intervention clause in your employment contract. Do you understand the magnitude of the liability you just dropped onto this establishment? I saved his life, Gemma shot back, her voice trembling but defiant. She squared her shoulders, refusing to shrink under his glare. He was in full cardiac arrest, Claude. He had no pulse. His own family was sitting there watching him die. If I hadn't stepped in, Maxwell Pierce would be in a morgue right now. That is not your call to make, Claude roared, slamming his palm against his mahogany desk. You are a waitress, Gemma, not a doctor, not a paramedic. You pour the wine and you remain invisible. Harrison Pierce has already informed me that you interfered with his attempt to administer his father's medication. You are terminated, effective immediately. Empty your locker and get out of my restaurant before I call the police and have you escorted out for trespassing. Gemma stared at him in disbelief. The sheer audacity of the lie stole her breath. Harrison had kicked the nitroglycerin pills under the table. She had seen it with her own eyes. But as she looked at Claude's panicked, sweaty face, she realized the truth didn't matter. The Pierce family commanded billions of dollars. They owned half the commercial real estate in the downtown loop. In the battle between a minimum-wage waitress and a titan of industry's heir, she was already a casualty. She walked the 3 miles back to her tiny apartment in Rogers Park, the biting wind whipping off Lake Michigan, freezing the tears on her cheeks. She was unemployed. She had $70 in her checking account, and her mother's next care payment was due in 5 days. The nightmare truly began the following morning. At exactly 7 a.m., a harsh, aggressive pounding rattled Gemma's front door. She pulled on a worn sweater and opened it to find 2 imposing detectives holding up golden badges. "Gemma Hayes?" the older one asked. He had a thick, graying mustache and eyes that had seen too much of the city's underbelly. "I'm Detective Gallagher, Chicago Police Department. We need you to come down to the precinct to answer some questions regarding an incident at L'Orchidee last night." "I told the 911 operator everything," Gemma stammered, pulling her sweater tighter around her chest. "I performed CPR on Mr. Pierce." "That's not what we're here about, Miss Hayes," Gallagher said, his tone devoid of warmth. "We're here regarding the felony theft of scheduled prescription medication, specifically a vial of nitroglycerin. Harrison Pierce filed a formal complaint at 3 a.m. He claims you pocketed the pills during the confusion, intentionally exacerbating his father's medical emergency. We also have a statement from the family attorney, Gregory Cole, alleging you physically assaulted Lydia Pierce when she attempted to administer aid." The floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. "That is a lie!" Gemma cried out, her voice cracking. "They let him choke. Harrison kicked the pills away. Gregory tried to bribe me with $100,000 to stop doing compressions. They wanted him to die before midnight, because of a new will." Detective Gallagher exchanged a skeptical look with his partner. "A billionaire's lawyer offered you $100,000 to commit murder, and you turned it down to do chest compressions? That's a hell of a story, kid. But right now, we have sworn statements from 3 highly respected members of the community, and you have a scraped-up uniform and a motive to steal. You need to come with us. Now." For 6 hours, Gemma sat in a sterile, freezing interrogation room. They didn't formally book her. The evidence was entirely circumstantial and based on witness testimony. But the psychological warfare was agonizing. They painted her as a disgruntled, desperate dropout from Loyola University's nursing program, who saw an opportunity to extort a wealthy family and botched it. When they finally let her go, pending further investigation, Gemma returned home to find a heavy, cream-colored envelope taped to her door. It was from a ruthless, elite corporate law firm in the loop. It was a cease and desist letter, accompanied by a draft of a civil lawsuit. Gregory Cole was suing her for $10 million for infliction of severe emotional distress, unauthorized medical intervention, and gross negligence. The final blow came the next afternoon. Her phone rang, displaying the number for Belmont Village Senior Living, the facility that cared for her mother. "Gemma, honey, I'm so sorry to call," the facility director said, her voice laced with genuine pity. "But the automatic withdrawal for your mother's monthly tuition was declined. You know our policy. If the account isn't brought current by Friday, we have to begin the discharge process. She'll be transferred to a state-run ward." Gemma dropped the phone onto her dilapidated couch. State wards were underfunded, overcrowded nightmares. Her mother, who couldn't even remember her own daughter's name on most days, would deteriorate rapidly in that environment. She was going to lose her mother. She was facing a $10 million lawsuit, and she was the prime suspect in a felony theft investigation. She had tried to reach out to Matteo, the brave busboy who had handed her the AED, hoping he would corroborate her story. But when she called his phone, it had been disconnected. She later found out from a sympathetic bartender that Matteo had been fired the same night, handed a thick envelope of cash, and put on a bus out of state by Gregory Cole's fixers. Gemma was entirely, hopelessly alone. The billionaires had closed ranks, weaving a web of lies so thick and impenetrable that the truth was suffocating beneath it. She curled into a ball on her worn rug, the heavy, crushing weight of defeat pressing the breath from her lungs. She had done the right thing, and it was going to destroy her life. 4 days passed in a blur of anxiety. Gemma had packed her mother's favorite sweaters into cardboard boxes, preparing for the transfer to the state ward. She had not eaten in 2 days. Every time a car drove past her ground floor window, her heart hammered against her ribs, expecting the police to arrive with a warrant for her arrest. It was Thursday evening when a sleek, jet-black Lincoln Navigator pulled up to the curb outside her apartment. The rain was coming down in sheets, slicking the Chicago streets in a mirror of neon reflections. A massive man in a tailored suit stepped out. He did not look like a cop. He knocked firmly on her door. When Gemma opened it, the chain still engaged, he held up a sleek identification card. "Miss Hayes, my name is Brooks. I'm the head of private security for Pierce Global Enterprises. I have a car waiting. Maxwell Pierce is awake, and he is requesting your presence immediately." Gemma stared at him, her pulse skyrocketing. "His family is trying to put me in prison. His lawyer is suing me for $10 million. I am not going anywhere." Brooks sighed. "He is aware of his family's actions, Miss Hayes. He is in the VIP recovery suite at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. He sent me to ensure your safe transit. He strictly forbade his family from being anywhere near the floor. Please. He owes you his life, and he wants to balance the ledger." Having absolutely nothing left to lose, Gemma unhooked the chain, grabbed her raincoat, and followed the giant into the storm. The VIP suite at Northwestern Memorial looked more like a penthouse at the Ritz-Carlton than a hospital room. Sweeping windows offered a panoramic view of the churning waters of Lake Michigan. Maxwell Pierce was sitting up in the mechanized bed. He looked older, frail, and his skin was bruised from the aggressive CPR and the defibrillator shock. But his eyes were wide awake and fixed on Gemma as she walked in. "You broke 3 of my ribs," Maxwell croaked softly. "You were dead," Gemma replied. "I did what I had to do." A ghost of a smirk played on his pale lips. "Sit down, Miss Hayes." Gemma took a seat. Brooks stood by the door. For 48 hours, I have listened to my wife weep crocodile tears. I have listened to my stepson talk about his trauma, and my lawyer outline a strategy to bury a young waitress who supposedly stole my medication, Maxwell said. Gemma's chest tightened. I did not steal anything. Harrison kicked them. Gregory tried to bribe me. Maxwell held up a trembling hand. I know. My family thinks I am an arrogant old man. But I am also deeply paranoid. My briefcase, sitting beside me during dinner, has a concealed military-grade audio recording device. It was running the entire time. He hit play on a remote. Pristine audio filled the room. Gemma heard Maxwell's gasps. She heard the vial shatter. Then she heard a shoe scrape against the rug, kicking the pills. Clear as a bell, Gregory's voice echoed. If you stop right now, I will personally see to it that a check for $100,000 is deposited. Gemma gasped, tears falling. My heart stopped, but my brain was firing, Maxwell continued. I heard them waiting for me to die, and I heard you tell them to go to hell. Because of you, I survived past midnight. The midnight clause is fully active. My greedy family gets nothing. Furthermore, Brooks just handed that audio to the district attorney. They are being arrested for attempted murder. He tossed a manila folder onto Gemma's lap. Balance. Inside is a fully paid deed for your mother's luxury care suite for 20 years. Your Loyola University nursing tuition is completely covered, and a cashier's check for $1 million. You refuse to look away, Gemma. Take the money. Take care of your mother. And go save more lives. Gemma walked out of Northwestern Memorial Hospital an hour later. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were finally parting over the Chicago skyline, revealing the bright, piercing light of a full moon. She breathed in the crisp, freezing air, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had walked into the fire of the 1% and survived, armed with nothing but her integrity and her unwavering refusal to let a man die in the dark. The nightmare was finally over, and a beautiful, unwritten future lay ahead of her. She smiled softly, knowing that tomorrow morning she would not be putting on a restaurant uniform. She would be putting on her nursing scrubs once again. Completely free. If Gemma's incredible bravery and refusal to back down inspired you, please hit that like button and share this story with your friends. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling real-life stories of everyday heroes who stand up against the odds. Drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in Gemma's exact shoes. Your support helps us bring amazing tales alive.